It was soon after the 21st of October 1952 when a woman with her 3 daughters were woken up in the dead of night by yelling and shouting and dogs barking. She ran outside to see that the whole village was on fire. She and her children were loaded into a caged lorry, and they were surrounded by soldiers and dogs, and they were being sifted. Men were being taken into a different area, and women and children were put in a caged lorry. And in that caged lorry, they were packed like cows, and they were driving until they stopped somewhere. They were dropped at a field. And on this field, they were unloaded. The field was surrounded by barbed wire and soldiers with watchtowers. On that field, those women and children remained, sleeping on the wet grass, frogs sleeping onto them, snakes going past them, and they lived on that field for 4 months. Then one day, they were asked by the soldiers. The women were marched to the forest to cut trees to start building the home that would become a concentration camp. That woman was my grandmother. She raised her 3 daughters in a concentration camp. My mother was only 8 years old, and they were let free when she was 16. This history is in my blood. It will never leave me. I'm haunted and traumatized by the history of Kenya. It's only in the last 10 years that I began to understand what my problem was. Like many Kenyans, we don't actually know what our problem is. It's only when my father died that I began to do research into this. And hence my book, Through the Lapid's Gaze, was written. This is how they wrote about it.
Pathé News cameraman Bill McConville has been assigned to cover the news in the Kikuyu country, and this is his first report. I boarded a BOAC Hermes aircraft at London Airport only a few days ago to fly to Nairobi. I don't mind admitting I had pretty mixed feelings. The journey out was uneventful. A little girl played in the gangway. From the pilot came the report, all well, dead on course. A mining engineer, Rodney Baker, his wife and their month-old baby were going out to make their home in Kenya. Then suddenly we got our first glimpse of the wild mountainous land of the Kikuyu. Major Fullager and his family took it all calmly, so did young George Good, who'd been on leave in England. Then Nairobi was below. BOAC had brought us to the heart of the Mau Mau territory in only 16 hours. The armed police soon showed us that the newspapers weren't exaggerating. You could feel the tension as soon as you set foot in the place. So this was Nairobi, the city of suspense, someone called it. It wasn't long before I saw why. Mau Mau suspects were being checked prior to interrogation. All were members of the Kikuyu, the tribe which has suffered most from the Mau Mau. Despite the fear that is in the hearts of all in Nairobi, they still go about their work as usual. But a loaded revolver in a man's or woman's belt told me just how great was that peril, and brought home to me for the first time the truth of those terrible stories of violence and sudden death. On the outskirts of Nairobi, I came across the Seven family. Brian, his sister Susan, and Mrs. Jones Seven. A gun was by her side as she read them a bedtime story. The next day at Karibanji, I filmed a large-scale roundup of men suspected of being involved in murdering 150 people in what they now call the Lari Massacre. I asked some of the officers about their job. They told me their chief problem was that so many Africans were reluctant to talk for fear of the Mau Mau's revenge. For even one of their own tribe may well be a member of the gang. A black cloud of suspicion hangs over all in Kenya, And until the Mau Mau are destroyed, the innocent, too, must suffer.